Today, we are answering a massive question. Is the dollar empire ending? The US dollar has been the mainstay of the international economy through decades with its international trade, reserves, and finance. However, the recent developments, such as the increased levels of debt, inflation, geopolitical conflicts, and the introduction of alternative currencies are potentially causing the experts to question whether the dollar reign of terror is finally being brought into serious consideration. You might ask how the dollar became the global currency of the world, whether it is undergoing pressure today, and what this would have on the average people worldwide. At the end, you will get a clear picture of whether dollar will continue dominating or a new financial era is about to emerge. Now it is time to dive in and find out the history of the dollar empire and the powers that may change the world money forever.
Immediately that the US dollar became the world leader in terms of currency. It is the product of a number of historical, economic, and political influences. Following the Second World War, the United States became the greatest economy in the world. Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 made the dollar the gold standard of international trade, pegging it on gold and introducing the stability in the international markets. The establishment of such bodies as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank also underpinned the position of the dollar by this agreement. The trade required dollars that were needed mainly to import oil, and this cemented its supremacy. The American economic development, technological advancements, and military strength had a role to play in making the dollar to be global in confidence. As time passed, the dollar was not only a currency, but also a symbol of economic stability in the world. Countries kept it on reserve, companies valued commodities by it, and investors turned to it in times of crisis. Nevertheless, there have always been challenges associated with the domination of the dollar. To keep the trust of the world, the U.S. economic policies are strong, inflation is low, and political stability is maintained. Any display of weakness would spread throughout the globe, affecting trade, investment, and even the daily prices. During decades, the system proved to be working quite well, though the cracks have begun to emerge during the last few years. One key factor is the U.S. national debt, which has soared past $33 trillion. Debt can undermine confidence in the dollar, making countries explore alternatives. Inflation, too, has been rising, eroding purchasing power. Global events like wars, sanctions, and trade disputes also impact how other nations view the dollar. The other consideration is technological advancement. Online currencies and blockchain-centered systems are the alternatives to normal money. China is among the countries that are building digital yuan systems as cryptocurrencies continue to gain worldwide interest. These emerging financial instruments might demand the traditional position of the dollar as the currency of choice in international trade. In brief, the U.S. power, international trust, and financial systems of strategies gave rise to the dollar empire. However, it is the same factors that established it in terms of political and economic policy, innovation, and global confidence that is being put to the test. Whether the dollar is adjusting to such new challenges or the empire is beginning to slowly fade is the question. However, there are indications today that the supremacy of the dollar may not be as eternal as it is perceived to be. Let's look at the main factors. Increasing debt and fiscal problems. The U.S. government has been operating huge deficits over the decades. Debt is more than $33 trillion, so the issue of sustainability is gaining momentum. The debts may destroy confidence in any currency, since it will cast doubt in stability in the long run. In case investors begin to question the U.S. capacity to control their finances, they can minimize their dependence on the dollar. Inflation and monetary policy. The recent inflation spikes have demonstrated that the economies are sensitive to the increase of prices. Inflation decreases the purchasing power of the dollar and puts off world investors. Although the Federal Reserve is employing the interest rates and other mechanisms to keep the inflation at bay, or at least, there could be a long-run pattern that undermines the belief in the dollar. Geopolitical tensions. The world is turning into multipolarity. Other nations such as China, Russia, and European Union are exploring the alternatives of the dollar to limit reliance on U.S. policies. Embargoes, trade disputes, and international conflict may speed up the dollar shift away. In a case in point, some countries now trade in their own currencies or trade in other foreign options. The emergence of digital and alternative currencies. The introduction of a cryptocurrency and central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, is a game changer. These computer systems permits quicker, less expensive, and in some cases more secure dealings without necessarily using the conventional currencies. The Chinese digital yuan is a good example, which is already being experimented worldwide. In case the alternatives increase, the world can lose dependence on US dollar. International diversification of reserves. The nations are diversifying their reserves and have increased euros, yen, yuan, and even gold. This dilutes the monopoly that the dollar holds in the global trade and finance. Although the dollar is still the primary global reserve currency, its portion has decreased marginally, and this is an indication that the world is gradually getting ready to have substitutes and new product markets. The developing economies are rapidly expanding at a better rate as compared to the developed ones. The more they gain economic weight, the more they insist on having an impact in the international trade systems. This change may undermine the monopoly of the dollar in the global transactions. In summary, although the dollar is strong nowadays, there is a number of reasons to believe that the empire is challenged tremendously. Debt, inflation, geopolitical tension, technological shifts, and global diversification are all indicators of the fact that in the world, the dollar might not always remain the undisputed king. To be able to preserve the position in the global economy, it will be important that the U.S. adapts and innovates. Is this the end of the dollar empire, then? The fact is, nobody can tell, but the indicators are evident. The world is evolving, and the dollar is challenged to a new level. The financial strife, inflation, international tensions, and the use of alternative currencies are all challenging the supremacy of the dollar. To ordinary people, it may be akin to modification in trade prices and financial stability. It translates to reconsidering reserves and international transactions in the case of countries. And to investors, it will equate to being keen on international trends that may completely overhaul financial environment. The dollar has dominated the world over decades, but there is a possibility that the days of undisputed supremacy are coming to an end. Change is imminent, and whether it is gradual or abrupt, we should get to know it and be ready to change. Do you believe the dollar empire will survive, or is this the gradual fall of the empire? Write your comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to ensure that you do not miss the latest on the global economy.